Welcome to another show of Wayne Ford Wants You. And I want to thank all my listeners and the people who have stopped me in the street, wrote me letters, emails, saying they like what I do. And I want to thank MediaCom for giving me the privilege to have this show going into our second year now. When I think about our community and I think about the state of Iowa, I think about a lot of things. But one thing I think about a lot, the population, Latino population. And that is growing here in the state of Iowa. And it's like me and Mary Campos some years ago started an organization called the Brown and Black Presidential Forum, and we're the oldest minority presidential forum in America. But one thing I told Mary Campos years ago, I said, Mary, you know what? By the time 2010 come around, there'll be more Latinos in the state of Iowa than blacks. She concurred. I want to talk about the growth of the Latino population. I'm very happy to have my guest here today, Mr. Joe Henry, who is Executive Director of LULAC.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wayne. It's good to be here.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Joe, LULAC, I know that's an acronym, but talk about that because I know that's a great Latino organization.
The League of United Latin American Citizens was formed in 1929, so it's the oldest Latino organization in the country.
All right.
Oh yeah. So we're 83 years old. Okay. We have about 900 councils throughout the country, and it's a great organization fighting for civil rights, education. We've been involved with the immigration issue that has happened lately across the country in different states. We applaud the efforts that have been put forth by the President and the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Made the right decision.
Yes.
We are there. We've been there for Latinos. The organization was founded in 1929 to kind of help deal with an issue when the U.S. fought against Mexico in the 1845-1847.
Right.
There were about 77,000 Mexicans that were displaced, living in the same place, but they found out that they were no longer in Mexico, that they were annexed to the United States of America.
Wow.
So their rights as citizens were taken away. They were treated as slaves.
Joe, I never knew this, Joe.
Oh, yeah, it was quite an amazing thing.
Okay.
The Mexican-American Civil War. We all remember the Alamo.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yes.
And after that war, major parts of Mexico went from being twice as big to half as big.
Gotcha. Okay.
So Texas went from Mexico to the U.S.
Gotcha.
California went from Mexico to the U.S. Arizona went from Mexico.
Okay.
77,000 Mexicans were then told, you are no longer living in Mexico. You no longer have your land that you farmed, and now it belongs to the United States.
Okay.
And if you want to stay here, you're pretty much going to be treated like a slave.
Powerful stuff.
So there were 77,000 Mexicans estimated around 1929, and several Latino organizations got together to try to figure out what they could do. So they got together, formed a united front. There were different names for the other two organizations, but at the end of the day, it was a League of United Latin American Citizens. And as time progressed from the 20s through the 30s, 40s, 50s, fighting for civil rights, making sure that Mexican Americans had the right to vote, to be jurors in trials. There was a point where Mexicans were not even allowed to sit as a juror because because our country felt that they were not qualified. There was segregation. Mexicans were not allowed to go to the same schools as whites. It was felt by the white community that they dressed too poor and they were inferior mentally. So our league had to fight these efforts up through the Supreme Court to demand for equal access.
Joe, a question. So there's the similarities between what happened to black people in this country and your people.
Exactly.
There's some similarities.
So we weren't shipped over, but we were told that we no longer lived where we thought we lived, and our rights were taken away. So yes, pretty much the same thing.
Okay.
And it has been a struggle, and that's been over 150 years.
Let's talk about today. Joe, the both presidential candidates saying that they can't win without the Latino vote. There's a lot of synergy going on. Supreme Court ruling in Arizona, a lot of synergy.
Right.
Joe, I mean, to be candidate, this is opportunity time now for Latino people to be candidate.
Oh yeah, it's a big time. I mean, 1 out of every 6 Americans is a Latino. Half the babies born today are Latino. I mean, the bottom line is, look at the numbers. When you look across the country, we're 15% of the population. Here in Iowa, we're 5%. Within 20 years, we will be 15%. When you look at close elections within congressional districts, it could be a matter of 5,000 or 6,000 votes. We have people in many congressional districts who could total that number. I mean, right now here in Iowa, we have 152,000 Latinos. We're estimating about 30% of Latinos are registered to vote, those of adults. And we're going through about 1 million voter records right now here in the state to determine who is already registered to vote. And then from there, we will attempt, and I think we'll be very successful, in not only identifying but registering between 30 to 50,000 Latinos in Iowa. We're thinking right now, and as we've gone through Polk County, for example, we've identified about 9,000 Latinos who are already registered to vote just in Polk County.
All right.
Polk County is one of 99 counties here in Iowa. We're estimating by the end of July, we will have identified about 30,000 Latinos who are registered to vote by this July.
All right. Very powerful.
Right. So we went last Monday to the Secretary of State's office, purchased the voter file for the whole state. We're going through those 1 million registered voters, and we're identifying people. I mean, we have something that is pretty easy for us to identify Latinos. We pretty much can guesstimate that a Gomez or a Gonzalez or a Ramirez is Latino.
Right.
So we're going to kind of identify it that way, but we're going to back it up by doing mailings, phone calling. We're going to help kind of bring it together, because there's other people like Joe Henry who may not be identified as Latino.
Right.
So we're going to be gathering information on others who are Latinos, then sending them postcards, talking with them about the issues.
Bring up one point. You mentioned numbers. 2042 is a number that everybody's talking about, because that's the number in this country where we have more minorities than whites here in this country. 2040, 2042, one of those numbers.
Right.
When you hear those numbers, I mean, there's been sensitivity on both parts. Some of my white friends I talk to, professionals, are a little bit concerned. When you hear that number, that the minority population will change in 2040, and a great deal would be for the population explosion, expansion of Latinos, what's your thoughts about that? Because some people are a little bit worried about that, Joe.
Well, I think it's excellent. I mean, it's natural. We're in the Western Hemisphere. The majority of people who live in the Western Hemisphere are Latinos. So it's just a matter of time. I mean, if half the babies born now are Latinos, well, then that makes sense. I think diversity has always been the history of this country, and things change, and we're going from an Anglo-Saxon to a Latino flavor, also with African American. So that's the beauty of our country. We applaud it.
Joe, when we come back, we want to talk about the other side of that, because, as you know, Arizona did a ruling about that, the Supreme Court. So there's still a movement out here, but I know they got the numbers, but I still don't trust that situation. I want to talk to you about when you come back.
Right.
Is there a time? We'll be right back with Wayne Ford Wants You. Welcome back to Wayne Ford Wants You. And wow, it's by the numbers, the numbers, the numbers. It's estimated in this country to 2042 comes, this country, for the first time in its history, will have more minorities than whites. And the bottom line, and the reason why this ain't because of the black population, it's because of the Latino population. I'm glad today to have the state director of LULAC as my guest. Joe, I'm gonna go back to this, Joe. Joe, if I'm a person, black or white, and I'm looking at this, I see the explosion of Latinos in my community. In Iowa, you can go to some communities like Perry, Iowa, and you can see all sections of downtown that years ago it was white, now it's all Latino. What do you tell people who are a little bit anxious about maybe this population explosion, and maybe, during the Alamo, remember the Alamo, well, maybe they're going to pay us back for what we did wrong? There's some anxiety out there. What's your thoughts about that, Joe?
Well, I think you see in most families that there is a blending. I mean, people are coming together. People are marrying outside of their historic racial groups.
That's right.
President Obama is a good example.
That's right. White
and black coming together. My family, my dad has a German ancestry.
Okay.
My mom, her family came from Mexico. By 1950, there'll be an American type of flavor, and it's going to be made of diversity. Okay. So people are coming together. It's not discussed politically. You see politicians try to separate us, but when you go into most family families. And you look at Iowa. Iowa has welcomed Latinos, has welcomed minorities.
Yes, it
There's
has.
954 communities in Iowa.
Right.
A significant small proportion of those have been saved by the fact of diversity by immigrants coming here. West Liberty is a town that went from having a kind of a German ancestry to a Latino flavor. It saved that town, saved the businesses there. And if you speak to most mayors of communities here in Iowa, they have very positive things to say about Mexican Americans, Latinos.
Right, right.
So I think at the end of the day,
All right, Joe.
the issue's been resolved. It's been resolved within the neighborhoods, within the communities. People welcome minorities because minorities help bring things together.
George, the Supreme Court ruling, as you know, many people have been talking about it. Arizona, where the state said, wait, I'm going to stop the car. I'm going to ask you for your card. Matter of fact, I don't even know who you are. If you got any reason why I can do to get you to the jail, I'm going to put you in there. Supreme Court ruling came out, and it had some good, it had some bad. What's your thought about the Supreme Court ruling, Joe?
Well, you know, the Supreme Court ruling, yes, in many ways it was good, but to still allow police officers, correct me if I'm wrong here, they can still pull you over. It cannot be used to the same extent as before. But this type of immigration policy that Arizona attempted to put into force basically uses racism. Because if you're a Latino, it doesn't matter whether you were born here or came from another country. You're brown-skinned. You could get pulled over just because you're brown skinned. As we know, driving while black
yes.
was an issue long ago,
Yes,
or
yes.
not too long ago,
That's
that was
right.
brought up.
That's right.
So when you have an immigration policy that allows enforcement authorities to make a determination based upon skin color, that is racism. There should not be any laws that allows racism to occur.
Very, very poignant. Joe, I hear criticism all the time. I mean, I hear criticism about black people, let alone Latinos. But one thing I hear, they're doing jobs much cheaply. We used to do those jobs. Or matter of fact, they're doing so cheaply, labor-wise, that even this white guy, he can't do it because he's going to charge too much. There seems to be a little situation. Now, we're all a country of immigrants. We understand that, Joe. But there's a movement out there that because this is your time, you have the numbers, you have all those things. Plus, there's a perception that you do labor at a much lower cost than other people can do, and that's competitive. And many business people don't like that because they can't keep up with a low cost. That's the criticism I'm sure you heard.
Well, yeah.
What's your thoughts about that,
Well,
Joe?
that's a yes, no, maybe. I mean, there are jobs, we could argue that nobody within a community may want to do because they feel that the wages are too low. Yes, there are many Latinos who are new to this country, immigrants, who come here, who are willing to do work even at a low wage because it's still a good wage for them. Many business leaders or business folks who utilize Latinos in that form are happy to have them because they are doing work that others don't want to do at the wage that they can afford to pay. I think when we look at this, though, we have also a labor issue. There's a minimum wage right now. It's too low. If wages were raised, then other people would like to do that.
Interesting point.
What I would say is if a community is concerned about whether or not immigrants are taking their jobs, then they should find a way to raise wages so that those who are not doing those jobs right now will want to take those jobs. But until then, you have private business interests, those folks who are hiring immigrants, and they can only afford to pay what they can pay.
Joe, a lot of people remember a person of Latino descent, Cesar Chavez.
Yes.
Legend. Even I heard about him when I was a young kid, and involved with the Black Power movement. Yeah. His name came up, and we identified a lot of our philosophy with his because he's been there, done that. Talk about him for a minute. I know he's one of the great heroes of your people.
Oh yeah, Cesar Chavez, United Farm Workers Union. He organized that Farm Workers Union back in I believe that was in the 50s.
Yes, 50s and early 60s.
Right,
yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And his thing was raising the wages of workers who worked in the fields. Right. And it took a movement. There was a lot of racism that he had to fight, and it became one of the most powerful unions in the country under the American Federation of Labor,
yes.
Congress Industrial Organizations.
Yes.
But he fought very hard, and it took a lot of mobilization. And again, he had to fight racism.
As we're going through this election time, Iowa was the state that got President Obama elected, as you know, because we won the Iowa caucus.
Right.
There seems to be, many people are telling me that Iowa, being a former politician, you hear this, Iowa could be the last state to tell you who the president is going to be. There's a perception out there that Latinos vote Democrat, don't vote Republican. What's going on, Joe? Because your people could call this election to be candidate with you. Could be the reason why, either president wins if Iowa is the last state and if Latinos vote. I mean, hard question, but many people are asking that question.